and welcome to Season 14, Episode 18 of the Ubuntu podcast. In today's show, we're going to be talking about Project Kebe. We'll have some webby love, and we will read your feedback. And joining me this week, as usual, are Alan.
Hello.
And Martin.
Bonsoir.
Martin's gone all French.
I don't know why. I don't know where that came from. Just suddenly came over all Derek Trotter.
Oh dear. What have you been up to then, Martin?
Well, taking those freshly minted Godot skills, I have entered a game jam.
Ooh. What's the criteria for this game jam?
It's my first game jam, summer 2021. They do them every 6 months, and the criteria is you're doing something new. So either you're using a new tool, new software, or you're new to game development. I'm new to lots of these things. And the theme is free. So my interpretation of that is I am only going to use free software or freely available assets or software that is free of cost in order to create a game.
Nice. Have you decided on your style, genre of game?
I have decided to make a platformer because from what I've read, that's a good first game to make in Godot. It's a safe choice to sort of learn the ropes. So I'm not going to be breaking any new ground, but I'm going to be having some fun learning how to do this stuff.
Nice. How long does the game jam run from and to, and how long?
It's a 2-week jam, so it ends on the 11th of July.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, we look forward to seeing your game.
I will be releasing my game at the end of the jam.
Alan, what have you been doing?
I bought a new HP Microserver.
Oh, is it one of the funny flat ones?
No, it's new to me. It's not brand new. It's a Gen 8. So it's the same physical size-ish as the old N36, N40, N54L models of Microserver, the black ones with the CD-ROM bay in the top. Same kind of form factor, but faster, newer generation of chip. I picked it up on eBay. It's got an SSD in it and 4 drives. I think they're 3 terabyte drives. And it came with an HP ILO card in it, so I can connect and administer it over the network, which is very handy. And I've started moving things off of the rather ancient HP Microservers that are very early generation devices onto this thing so I can reduce the number of machines I have running and and kind of consolidate. But also this one's newer, so it's faster. Yeah.
So what is the motivation for this, that a newer server can do more things in one box and therefore you have to run less things, or were your existing ones at risk of going pop at some point?
All of the above. It's the ones that I have. They're getting a bit long in the tooth, and my worry is that something like the power supply will go, and then I'll be a bit stuck, and I don't really want to be a bit stuck. Now, okay, I can pick up a power supply on eBay, and actually I have a complete spare HP Microserver of the same generation in the loft, so I could yoink a power supply out of one of those, but I don't want to get to that point. I would rather replace them while they're still running, and then decommission them and maybe sell them, or or not, I don't know, or you have to leave them as backups or toys to put Kubernetes on or something, I don't know.
If you ever do find yourself in a tricky position with the old one, I have an N54L on the shelf above me doing nothing. So consider me a parts shop if the worst happens.
I love how these things do the rounds. One of my old microservers is now at Stuart's house. He has one of my old HP microservers I sold to him years and years ago, a long time ago. I actually dug out the email that I sent to him. And shipped it to him. So he uses that for his home server requirements. And I think I got one off of you at some point.
I think you got I had a pair. So it's an N54. Yeah, I think I gave that to you some time ago.
Yeah, so I've got a 36, a 40 and a 54. And now I've got the Gen 8, which is the newer one. So
it's a bit like ThinkPads. They're going to start breeding.
No, I really want to get rid of them. I don't want to collect these at all.
Have you not documented all these on your wiki page?
Yes, I have. Yes. Of course I have.
Well, they're collector's items now. You're never going to get rid of them.
They've got names, so I can't kill
pets.
them. They're not like what is it, Alan Jude? That says you can't give them names. They have to be like
cattle,
like cattle, not pets. But unfortunately, my microservers are all pets. They're not cattle.
And with that, let's move on. Now, I noticed a post on the Snapcraft forum from a user called Future Tim announcing a project called Project Kebe. Now, this interested me because Project Kebe is an open source Snap store. We've had a few conversations about the architecture of Snaps and the Snap store ecosystem and ways that it works and could it be done differently. And I seem to remember, coming to the conclusion that, if this was a big problem that someone actually needed to solve, then someone could just write their own Snap store that, they can run a command and install stuff from there instead of canonical Snap store. But no one had done that. So therefore, maybe it wasn't really as big as a problem as people make out. But then someone's gone and done it. So that's quite interesting, isn't it?
So there's a bit of background to this. Yes, one of the biggest complaints about Snaps, I'm not sure it is one of the biggest complaints, one of the loudest complaints about Snaps is the fact that the Snap Store code is proprietary. The back end is proprietary. And then the net result of that, combined with the fact that Snapd, the daemon that's on your end user computer, points to that server and that server alone and doesn't have the capability to have multiple servers configured at the same time, leads some people to dislike it and not want to use it because they don't want, well, for numerous reasons. They don't want to use a proprietary backend. They don't like the idea of Canonical owning it. They don't like possibly being locked in. There's loads of reasons why, right? But that's the way it is Snapd points to one server and that server is proprietary. And so, yes, for a long time, the answer has been, well, that's the way we've architected it. When I say we, as in that's the answer that Canonical gave, both when I was there and before and after. But also, some people would rather host their own store, not necessarily, have everything in the central store. And I think that's the motivation. Part of the motivation for this is people want to be able to run their own store, much like a Linux repository.
Yeah. So yeah, it sounds like the way this works is basically you run this server and you run a slightly patched version of Snapd, which can then point to this. And then when you install something, it will look in your repository first. And then if it doesn't find it, it will then go upstream, or however you would describe that relationship, to the canonical Snap store. So that means that if you wanted to either publish a different version of something which Canonical, or not Canonical provide, but someone has published in Canonical Snap Store, or you wanted to publish something not in Canonical Snap Store because maybe it's an internal project, maybe some other reason, maybe it's private for whatever reason, then you can do it this way basically, and Snap will give that priority over the public Snap Store.
I think that's the goal. Yes.
Yeah.
So Alan said, people want to run their own Snap store. I think that's a lie. I don't think people want to run their own Snap store. I think people that want to use Snaps are quite happy with the Snap store, and people that don't like Snaps just have another thing to complain about, that the Snap store is a central proprietary backed service and wouldn't install their own Snap store so that they could suddenly start using Snaps.
That's a potentially contentious opinion. I think I disagree. I think there are some people who want to have everything hosted themselves. There are plenty of people over the years who've hosted their own apt repo. And so it has become the standard that if you're an enterprise or an organization or any kind of company or group that wants to be able to be in total control of the bits that are landing on your devices, you would set up an apt repository or a Debian repository or whatever kind of repository it is, some kind of repository. And I think it's there are organizations. Yes, there are, the peanut gallery, but I think there are organizations out there who will not use snaps because they can't fully host it themselves.
So with that, I agree with. I agree that there are organizations that would be interested in hosting their own Snap store, but there are not people that would be interested in doing that, because those people, that those two sets of people that want to use snaps and want to host their own Snap store don't overlap.
So why is it the way that it is, right? Why is it that the Snap store is proprietary? And this is a question we used to get a lot, right? And in interviews and in blog posts, we would very carefully describe why, right? And it's a difficult one because, we make a load of open source software when we're in Canonical and working on Ubuntu, but there's this kind of wart on the side, which is this proprietary lump that is sitting there that people don't like the look of. It's an unpleasant thing to look at when the rest of your stuff, or the vast majority of the rest of your stuff, is GPL3 or, whatever license. And I think that's partly why people get a bit icky about a fundamental part of the infrastructure of the machine, like the way that they're getting their security updates and their software updates is a proprietary blob that you have no control over. I think that's part of it.
And the thing is it's not like a singular blob. One of the reasons why it's never been open sourced is it's so tightly integrated into many, many back-end services, not least Launchpad, among other things, and the build service and the build infrastructure and all the rest of it, that it isn't easy to just untangle and say, well, here it is. And, that's it, because it's not a thing. It is many, many things.
Well, yes. But the counter argument to that is it could be. It could be a web server, right? It could be just a web server on your intranet. And as the IT administrators, you are responsible for putting the files in the right places on that web server. You don't need a build system like Launchpad. You don't need a whole certificate system. You don't need a whole system to sanity check the files, because you own this environment. You own the bits that are being put onto this server, and you own the estate of machines that it's being delivered to. So it's entirely up to you to verify the stuff is good before you put it on the web server, right? Just like a apt repository. It's entirely up to you to control that stuff. An apt repository is basically a dumb web server. And there's no reason a Snap server couldn't be a dumb web server. The thing is, though, Snapd has a whole bunch of other stuff around it, like the assertions that decide whether certain interfaces are connected, or when you download this thing, you also have to download that other thing as well. And so there is a load of extra stuff that goes with it. And then beyond that, there's all the build server and everything. But I don't think you have to have all of that. If all you wanted to do is deliver, basically zip files to machines is what you're doing, because Snap files are just compressed files at the end of the day with binaries in them.
Yeah, I mean, if you overlooked all of the cryptography and integrity checking and all of the security services and features that exist in Snapd and its communication with the Snap Store, and just had a thing that was download bits and unpack that, well, not even unpack those bits, but put them in this place, then yes, it's quite straightforward. But then again, we talked about organizations potentially wanting to host their own stuff, but they'd be giving up all of the facilities of Snaps and Snapd that they probably find attractive in the process.
One of the things about this conversation that I found interesting was that the description of the changes to Snapd sounded quite minimal. It didn't sound like this was a major rewrite. It's just like a few lines changed here and there to let it prioritize. I don't think it prioritizes the other service. It uses that service, and then that might proxy to the Snap Store. But it got me wondering, if it's not that big a change to support something like this, would Canonical ever accept patches to make it work out of the box? Would that not take off, a lot of this heat if they just made it so that the place it points to is, in a configuration file, and if you don't use that, then good luck to you. You're on your own. You change the defaults, buyer beware. But is there a deeper reason why they wouldn't accept that to make something like this possible?
So When I was at Canonical, there were many reasons why the Snap Store was a central single place, but one of the reasons was this. It was the experience of having operated PPAs. And the fact that at some point there were over 170,000 PPAs. And, how do you discover them? How do you find them? People can just delete them at will. And at one point, the most hit PPA had nothing in it. It had been deleted. And, it was to overcome this problem of many, many instances of things and how do you discover them. Having everything in one place makes it easy for people to publish and easy for people to find.
There's two problems there. One is you want to be sure that users can find their software and continue to get updates to their software. And having a central place, much like the Play Store or the iOS App Store or the Microsoft Store, it's a common pattern where you have a central place that the user knows that they can go and get software, right? And it was a compelling argument. It's a compelling argument to say you open the graphical storefront, you search for the thing you want, it should show you the most relevant results, and you click on them and you install them, right? Compare that with before the snaps existed. It was you search in there and you can't find it. You do a search online and you maybe find a binary that you download and have to use arcane terminal commands to unpack, or you find a PPA which may or may not be built for your current release of Ubuntu. Like, bear in mind, we're only really focused on Ubuntu at this point. And that PPA, if you upgrade your machine, the owner of that PPA might not choose to update the packages for the next release. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that we learned through PPAs that we realized they just weren't the right way to do this, having multiple repositories. And I personally feel like Flatpak have made the same mistake by having multiple repositories, because it is possible for anyone to stand up a repository, just like an apt repository and a deb repository. And you get a bunch of users pointing at it. And all it takes is for someone to have a kid, not be able to pay the bills, or die, and that repository goes away. And you have a bunch of users out there with outdated software that they can't update. They might not even know that the repository has gone away. I personally had this. I installed GNOME Builder from the official Flatpak repository, not FlatHub, from a Flatpak repository maintained by the developer. And GNOME Build, the official GNOME tool, was no longer getting updates. And it's because they moved the repository somewhere else to a different host. But there's no way for me to know that. And so, there's a whole bunch of discovery and update and security things that make actually having a central store a good idea. And, I don't work for Canonical anymore, but I can certainly still see why that is a pleasant experience for the user and for the developer.
Yeah. Apart from being, compatible with the rest of the industry in terms of, an app store ecosystem. And, Flatpak in the early days were very sort of vocal about you can have, anyone can stand up a server. But that didn't last long, did it? I mean, everyone has sort of coalesced around FlatHub. It's like their hub for all Flatpaks, with the exception of, and this is where potentially having a solution like Kebe would pay off, Elementary and Endless OS, who operate their own Flatpak servers, stores, repositories, for their distributions. And had Canonical had the means for somebody to stand up their own Snap Store in the past, then maybe Elementary would have used that technology rather than Flatpak.
I'm interested to hear what our listeners think. Are you a likely audience for Project Kebe, either personally at home? Will you be running your own Snap Store, or could you see a place for this in your organisation? Email show@ubuntupodcast.org. And now it's time for some Webby love. And Alan found the love this week.
I did find the love. This is from Catherine Peterson, who is an engineer at GitHub. And Catherine created a thing called readme.so. It's a website. You just go there and you go to readme.so, and this is aimed at developers who are looking to create an attractive and functional and useful README markdown file to put in their Git repository. Mm-hmm. You go to readme.so and you get a markdown editor, web-based markdown editor in the middle of the screen. And on the left-hand side, you have a bunch of blocks that you can add to your README, which are common blocks, chunks that you would see in any open source project on GitHub in their README. And you add those blocks and then tweak the markdown. And obviously the formatting is done for you because it's just injected a bunch of pre-written markdown for you. You just have to change, URLs and image URLs and stuff like that and the description of your project. And then you can just copy and paste that directly into your readme.md on GitHub. It's brilliant. The editor is I think it's called Monaco. I think it's Monaco is the web-based editor, the same one that's used that drives Visual Studio Code. So it's a common, visual editor, but it's just delightful. It's really easy to use. It's lovely for someone like me who creates a project on GitHub and I just push the code and I don't even bother with a README. This is a really nice way to make sure that I've got an attractive way for people to understand what my project is and link to things like the build machines and, screenshots and how to install guides and API documentation, and everything you would need is all in these little buttons down the left-hand side. It's great.
And I assume that this looks fantastic because I'm often thinking, how could I make my READMEs look a bit more attractive? If you use this and then you want to go back and edit it again, can you just drop the raw markdown into it and it knows what all the sections and stuff are? And
I haven't tried that. That's a great idea. I don't see why not, because it's all just markdown in the middle. It would be nice if it did, but yeah, worth a try. The nice thing I thought about this is Catherine, who maintains this, created it, and then the GitHub account promoted it a little while ago. And then she applied for a job shortly afterwards and now works at GitHub. So
Brilliant.
It's a delightful little story.
Very good.
And now it's time for all your wonderful feedback. And first up, Joe Fallon emailed us to show@Ubuntu Podcast with feedback for Mark. Oh, that's me.
Joe says, as a parent of tweens, looking back, the photos make me smile, but the videos melt my heart, even the really short ones. I would strongly advise that you take more videos than photos, and longer videos at that. Videos of everything and nothing. Video all the things.
Yes, I would totally agree with that, actually. We do lots of it, especially now my daughter's starting to talk. Whenever I think she said something new, we whip out the camera and try and get her to repeat it. Lots of people got in touch to let us know about their top 3 apps. Valentine Bocher emailed us.
Number 1, Emacs. Replace VS Code with Emacs in the segment about your favorite applications. I do appreciate exactly the same things about Emacs, but then some weird configuration clash happens and I'm ending up having to kill all hanging Emacs, so maybe there's something to VS Code. 2, Anki. A spaced repetition flashcard implementation with all kinds of nice features like LaTeX rendering, has a good Android client as well and syncs auto-magically. Oh, that's interesting. And Firefox. It's my web browser. Funnily enough, a Windows-using friend coerced me on ideological bounds to use Firefox. I'm sticking with it out of habit. Anki, interesting. I'd not heard of Anki. I'll have a look at that.
One I've heard about before is a useful tool for schools and colleges as a learning tool. Jason Armstrong emailed us.
These 3 apps are installed toot sweet. Inkscape, Krita, and Storyboarder from Wonder Unit. I realise they're all cross-platform, but I simply can't do without them. I hadn't heard of Storyboarder. That looks quite good.
Yeah, we're getting loads of application tips for this. Great. I love this.
Pierre Ecoy emailed us.
I rarely edit videos, but when I need to, I use Kdenlive. And Martin's note about Shotcut made me want to try it. Thanks, Martin. Alan mentions that Google Chrome let him use different profiles for different use cases. I'd like to mention that Firefox also has a profile manager, but it's kind of hidden. You need to start Firefox with Firefox -P, but it works well. No, it doesn't. For coding, I really like PyCharm, which is developed by JetBrains, the same company that makes PHP Storm. Really great IDE. Yes, you can stop telling me about Firefox having a profile manager. I know Firefox has a profile manager. I've used Firefox since the start when it was Phoenix, and it's had a profile manager since the start. But it's really rubbish. It's implemented really terribly, and it has been since the start. And Google Chrome and Microsoft Edge do it better.
Dale emailed us.
My 3 gotta have apps. Google Chrome for everything you already mentioned. Godot. I recently started learning game production with Godot. Easy to learn and is actually 100% usable on Linux, unlike some of the others. And KDE Connect. It's magic. I make Android games with Godot and can send the resulting APK to my phone in my pocket. Share the clipboard both ways. It's super handy and sending pictures from phone to computer in just a few clicks. That's a top tip about putting the game exports on the phone. Thank you for that. You will have heard I've started learning Godot, and I'm hoping I might be able to get my game to work on Android so that I may be installing KDE
That's
Connect.
a great tip, isn't it? I
like it's a good tip. That's the most compelling reason for installing KDE Connect I've heard so far.
JT left a comment on our website.
Rapid Photo Downloader, which does exactly what it sounds like. It can pull files from my camera's SD card or from my phone while organising them into folders with the date and renaming them automatically with the date and timestamp, as well as the image number assigned by the camera. I find this incredibly useful as I tend to take a lot of pictures. Digicam, to organise the photos, I've decided to keep. I have a directory structure with different photo albums based on what's in the picture or where I took it, and Digicam displays in a very nice way. And Firefox. I've been using this for so long that switching away would now be like amputating a limb. In contrast to Alan, I really like the multi-tab account container tabs because I don't want to open multiple windows. I use the tree style tab extension to manage the ludicrous amount of stuff I have open sometimes, especially on my main computer. Okay, admission. I also like the multi-account container tabs. I used to like it quite a lot in Firefox. Actually, I've switched to Microsoft Edge. So in that episode where I said I use Chrome, I now don't use Chrome. I'm using Microsoft Edge. And by default, Microsoft Edge has a tab list down the side rather than having the tabs across the top. And oh my gosh, it's amazing. Edge is better than Chrome.
Sisyphus Jones left a comment on our website.
I expect you're aware of it, but VS Codium is VS Code, but without Microsoft's telemetry and tracking removed. It also uses the MIT license. So why use VS Codium? This has been edited because I read the email. Anyway, I will explain why. You can turn Microsoft's telemetry and tracking off with 2 configuration settings. It's Microsoft that release VS Code under an MIT license. And VS Codium has one significant drawback, which is the extension marketplace is disabled by default. And although there are ways to shoehorn it back in, I think it's actually, illegal in air quotes. It's not a license compatible thing to do. And I heavily rely on the extensions in VS Code. So VS Codium is a nice editor, but it is not the IDE that VS Code is.
I am aware of VS Codium. I made the snap of it. So, there is a snap of VS Codium in the store. But yeah, I use VS Code as well. I wasn't really aware of the problems that might come with running VS Codium, but I have used VS Code, and frankly, I don't care about the Microsoft telemetry.
And finally, James Heaton emailed us this heartwarming tale.
A little over 2 weeks ago, I was genuinely gutted to realise that I was listening to the last episode of the series and thought a void would be left in my life until the next one started. A week last Thursday, that sadness was replaced with surprise and confusion as another episode came out. I concluded that you must recycle old episodes while off for break to keep people engaged. That's odd, I thought. Today, I realised that actually I dozed off and my podcast app had made its way all the way back to the last episode of the previous series, which I haven't finished listening to. Thanks for the rollercoaster ride and for making something I'd actually miss.
Thanks, James.
That's very kind of you. Thank you, James.
And that's all of your feedback for this week. And that's all for episode 18. Thank you very much for listening. Next week, we'll be discussing the community news, the goings-on in the wider tech ecosphere, and some events. If you'd like to get in touch with us with some more wonderful feedback, you can email show@ubuntupodcast.com. ubuntu.org. If you'd like to leave us some unkind comments, you can do so on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Ubuntu podcast. And if you would like a VPS, you can get an excellent VPS like the one we host this show on from Bitfolk at bitfolk.com.